Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 282 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at my site, ContinueFit.com. It's also where you can find out more about my book, Be Like the Best, 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or challenge that will help you be like the best. You can go to ContinueFit.com to check that out. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, spoke to Coach Boyle about their current state of being open in Massachusetts. They're actually allowed to do outdoors. He's talking about their plans at MBSC. Continuing the possible litigation that they have with the state, they still don't trust the state. And then some of the things that was in his article, 25 years, 25 mistakes, on StrengthCoach.com right now. We've been posting a lot of Strength Coach classics. They're all in the free section. Check them out. 25 years, 25 mistakes is one of Coach Boyle's most popular articles ever. So you want to check that out. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, I'm on with Alwyn Cosgrove to talk about things to think about when preparing to open, even though right now they are still closed. They're still lobbying to try to get in. He also has a lot of clients, coaching clients that are open now. So we talk a little bit about that. Don't forget, leading your fitness business through the here and now. It's a webinar. It's free on the pivots that they've made at Results Fitness to continue to show up for their clients through the current pandemic and the exact steps you can take to do the same. It's free. Go to resultsfitnessuniversity.com to check it out. For the Train Heroic data-driven coaching segment, Adam Doughty talks to Tim Robinson about behavior change, some of the things that are exercise that Adam did at Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a human performance company that both Coach Boyle and I use to deliver our online training. You know I've been talking about this for a while. We've been blown away about how well Train Heroic allows us to connect with our athletes. And if you're a coach and you're not coaching on Train Heroic, I don't know what you're waiting for. They just launched plans that start as low as $10 a month, and they got a free 14-day trial. So if you mention that I sent you, Coach Boyle and I will put a 4-week athlete development program into your account absolutely free. So if you're a coach looking for the best online training solution in the game, go to trainheroic.com. Take your free 14-day trial. All right, for the functional movement system segment, Gray Cook continues and finishes his 6-part series. Today he talks about development. So next episode, we're going to do a special episode. I'm going to put all of the last 6 functional movement system segments together so you can hear them together in one episode. That'll be probably next week. For the BodyByBoyleOnline.com, hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment. Scott Livingston, former NHL Strength Coach, co-founder at ReconditioningHQ. We're going to talk about that. Host of the great podcast, Leave Your Mark podcast. He's had so many great people on there. He's the co-owner of Premier Performance in Montreal. And we're going to talk about what is Reconditioning, the company that he has formed with his wife, and what they're doing to help fitness professionals. I asked them, have we gone too far with corrective exercise? What are their non-negotiables? Combining PT and strength and conditioning, and have we crossed the line? We're going to talk about sustainability and keeping athletes healthy for long term, and the upcoming International Hockey Performance Summit that he's putting on with some legends and some great names in the game of hockey right now. So you'll want to check all that out at ContinueFit.com. We got a lot of links to that. So lots of things to get to. Let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Right now, we extended the trial. It's not going to last. Coach Boyle and I are both going back. We're going to talk about that in a minute to a little bit more training. Life is getting a little bit closer to normal, but for now we have 30 days, just a buck, not going to last forever. You have access to everything, including the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions. Can't beat that kind of advice. Check it out at strengthcoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
Yeah, it's tough to be doing bad in a day like today. It is about as nice a day as you're going to get. I think it's 90 degrees and sunny. So
yeah, it's gorgeous out.
Mike Potenza has his weather report.
Mike, there you go. Coach, all right, so last time, it's so crazy. In a short amount of time, some things have changed. What you guys were doing is obviously working. You got some serious press in Boston and Boston radio. Where are you guys stand? You can do outdoor training now, right? Is that true?
Yes, we can do outdoor training right now. So we were in today setting up our outdoor training area. Luckily for us, we have, well, actually, I could probably tell you exactly what we have, but we have about 3,000 square feet of turf out back. And they just established that outdoor training was allowed. So we will start outdoor training Monday morning. We're going to do a little dry run Friday as a staff, just to see how it goes. But we'll be training people Monday morning, starting with our adult groups probably at 5:15 and going right through the day outside, as long as the weather holds up.
It should be pretty packed too, because when the kids, they're all home, nobody's going to school anymore. And so, when you didn't have a 1 or a 2 o'clock, now you're just going to be going. Bobby, you're gonna extend your hours a little later too.
I mean, we already go to 9. I don't think we can go much beyond that. So it's, I think it'll be interesting. I think we're going to be really busy. The kids are going to be harder because this has to be social distanced and masked, and I mean, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get this done. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to be able to do this? The adults, the 1 hour adult group is going to be easy. A kid's sort of speed plyo conditioning is going to be a little bit harder in terms of, we were talking today about setting up cones 6 feet apart, and almost like you're out, trying to get into Home Depot or Stop and Shop. Somebody's going to jump over 5 hurdles, and then the next kid's going to move up in line and jump over 5 hurdles, and you move up to the next cone. You know what I mean? It's got to be it's got to be super organized and a little bit robotic for it to pass the muster right now in terms of what the state is requiring. The state has put out, I mean, they're just pages and pages. The guideline, the outdoor training guideline, I think is 5 pages.
Wow.
Just the memo, I'm looking at it right now. Specific safety and reopening standards for parks, open space, and outdoor education programs. And I think it's 4.5 pages or something like that.
Mike, question though, when is personal training one-on-one indoor allowed? That's 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks, right?
Phase 2, which should be a week from Monday if they don't push things out. The thing we have to worry about now in that situation is if there's even a little bump in the numbers based on what we've been seeing so far, they're going to push phase 2 back, because they said phase 2 would be minimum of 3 weeks, but potentially longer. That's one of the reasons that we've been pushing as hard as we have, because they're just giving us all of this. Maybe this will happen, but there's really very little that's etched in stone. That's why this outdoor training thing is a really big forward step for us. So we're trying to focus on the positives.
Mike, so for me, if it's me, I'm going to say, all right, I have to change my programming. I don't care about like you were talking about, like the cones and the running. Can't you skip that for a couple of weeks? I mean, you're just getting them back. Maybe they don't need to do everything. At least you got them there. You're going to work out. Some of these things you could just take out instead of saying, we got to go to our template.
Well, I like the challenge of trying to figure out how to do it, to be honest.
I know you
because we did figure out, so it was really interesting. Today we were out measuring out basically pod sizes and, analyzing what's going to be in each pod, because in our outdoor training, one of the requirements is no shared equipment. So we've basically got a warm-up section, and they're supposed to be 12 by 12. So we'll have 8 people warming up in 8 separate 12 by 12 areas. And then on the other side of that, we'll have 8 people lifting in a separate 12 by 12 area. And we'll sort of follow our same kind of, factory-based, warm up, move into the weight room, and next group comes in and warms up. So, we'll start that. But it's really, whereas before we might have 4 or 5 stops along that road, right now with outdoor, we have 2. So it's, half hour here, half hour there, you're done, you're out. Next group, half hour, you're done, you're out. Every group, new group every half hour, moving them through. And that, we're figuring out, okay, with the pods, we got everybody got an 18-inch box, everybody got a bench. People will go in and select their own dumbbells and bring them out. So they'll have to walk into the gym, grab their dumbbells, bring their dumbbells out to their area. Theoretically, if based on what we're reading, they can then take their mask off and do the workout because they will be in their own 12 by 12 foot area. They will be more than adequately social distance because they won't be moving, they won't be sharing anything. And then when everything's done, you wipe everything down, everybody puts their dumbbells away, kettlebells away, and bang, you're off to the races for your next group. But as I said, I'd like to see, can we do that in some way with the kids and have it work? Because there's always some challenge in figuring out the logistics. Like, okay, we can do this. So I always think we're going to be able to do it. We're going to do it better than everybody else. And we're going to be up and running really well. And I don't want to say, oh, well, we just won't run. You know what I mean? I don't want to take the easier route. I'd like to take the harder route and see if we can pull it off. And if we can't, we can. If, we might have to, we always say we might have to drop back and punt, realizing that, okay, this didn't work.
Yeah.
But I like to take it as a challenge and say, can we put together a really good program that falls within the guidelines that the state is asking us to adhere to?
Yeah. Mike, just in terms of interns, you don't have interns, right? You're not going to have interns.
We're not going to have interns, no. But see, this is the other thing that's interesting. So everybody right now is getting paid because of the PPP.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope we get to the point where everybody's got 40 hours and that becomes a concern. But I'm hoping more that we can at least get everybody back to work. We were kind of talking about that today because what we're going to do is from 11 to 3 or maybe later, we'll let people personal train because they're not going to be able to personal train in the morning because when we set up kind of this double pod setup, there's no room for a personal training client. Someone can't say, oh, let me slip in here with one person because the way it's not set up, like that's not conducive to what we want to get done. But at 11 o'clock, theoretically, like I said today, we can have 16 personal training clients. And I said, it's 12 by 12, but it's actually 12 by 24. I said, you got a 12 by 24 studio and, you got a bench and you got a box and you got a couple of valve slides and a landmine, and whatever it is you're going to have. Okay, figure out how to train somebody in that space. And that will be different for our clients too, because they're very used to having all the space they want and going from place to place. And the new normal idea does apply. It bugs me when people say this is the new normal, but for a while, at least until the masks come off, this is going to be what we're stuck with.
Yeah, and also, they've been doing this. If they've been complying at home, they've been off their game anyway, right? So right. This is going to be an upgrade.
What people said today, Steve Bigelow and some guys said that they've been doing that. They've been doing the Zooms this way, so they'll be very adaptive. I think they'll just be glad to have access maybe to a little bit more equipment, and they'll have people around. There'll be a little bit more interaction. There'll be a coach who's watching them versus them watching the coach. I think that's a big reversal with the Zoom workouts. So we're hoping that all of that together will get people in and back and doing what they want. The good thing is, in all honesty, more than half of our adult clients stayed with us and kept their memberships, which is pretty cool. So obviously for us, the people that continue to pay will be the people we'll reach out to first. We'll get those people plugged in, whether they're personal training clients or whether they're adult group clients. And then the next wave will be figuring out what to do about kids. Technically, kids don't start till June. I want to say the 15th was when the kids programs were supposed to start. If we can have personal training inside operating by then and kids outside, I think we can do something that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And I need to see people, so I might just drive up for the day and work out and then drive home because I can't take this anymore. Just walking my dog all the time. Coach, we've been adding Strength Coach Classics on because we have so many new members. I feel like you have so many amazing articles through the years. We just posted a joint by joint training approach to training. Is rotation training hurting your performance, or is rotation even a good idea? Does it hurt? Picking set 3. Training is like farming. 25 years, 25 mistakes, you said might be your most popular article ever. And then the Curse of Knowledge we posted today. I want to talk really quick about 25 mistakes again, just because I want to revisit that. One of the things, mistake 3, not visiting other coaches, for me, that was huge. I think you really impacted a lot of coaches with this to say, I really need to get to other gyms. And for me, I started Strength Coach TV because of your mistake number 3. I said, you know what? I'm going to start bringing the camera to these gyms so people can, because I love that idea. Talk to us about this article and how popular it was.
It's really funny because I was on the way to New York. I was on train to New York, I think, going down to speak for Geraldine at Equinox when I wrote that article. And there was a Barbara Walters special, I think, when she turned 58. And it was something like 58 years, 58 lessons or something. And I thought had watched that the night before, and I wrote the title down. And then I sat down in the train, because I always take the train to New York, and just started writing. I said, I wonder if I can come up with 25 mistakes. And it was one of those articles that flowed so incredibly easily in terms of, okay, what was one mistake? What was the next mistake? Boom, 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 boom. And, before I knew it, I had an easy 25. And it was crazy because it was really well received, much better than I thought. I just did it. I think I did it actually because at that time I was writing for T Nation and they were paying me per article. And I was just thinking about article ideas. And that popped into my head. I never thought it would kind of have the legs that it has, but people continue to read it. But the good thing is the mistakes that we talk about are the same mistakes that everybody makes over and over again. They're sort of timeless mistakes. They're not ones that go away based on what year it is. Oh, wow, it's 2020 right now, and that article was written in 2007. It's outdated because, like you said, not visiting other coaches, thinking you know it all. So many of those things that you think about in that article were just things that everybody's still doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of them, not recognizing stress. Another, neglecting your own health. Not taking enough vacation time. Confusing reading with believing. Big one here. Confusing disagree with dislike. I wish we, I try to remember this a lot because I take, man, I don't know if I could do what you do and take all the comments all the time. I get pretty pissed pretty easy. And then I hate somebody, but that's a big one. But the confusing disagree with dislike is really something I really try to work on. If somebody disagrees with me, okay, it boils. I get, I think I get a little hot at first, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is stupid.
Yeah, and I think that's always been one of my favorites because I think I can remember, and I won't say who, but on the Perform Better tour one day, there were 4 of us speaking. And 2 of the guys were more of the kind of rah, let's do a circuit and get sweaty guys. And 2 of us were more, I guess, what I would call more on the sort of scientific rehab, physical therapy side. And one of the other speakers was just so like, look at what they're doing. This is so, he was like apoplectic. He was so upset by it. And I was kind of like, but don't you like those guys? And he was like, yeah, they're really good guys. He's like, okay, you don't have to do their training. You don't even have to like their training. You just have to realize that we can't confuse the fact that we disagree with them, that we dislike them. And that is strength and conditioning. That's the sort of, whether it's the West Side or CrossFit or powerlifting or, if somebody's on the other side of the issue, you hate them and you say bad things about them and you try to make their life difficult. That is very much a strength and conditioning fitness thing. And it's a thing that I really tried to avoid because I don't see the point. And sometimes I'm like you, like I don't do as good a job. Some days I do a better job. Some days I do a not so good job. But I try to keep reminding myself that, hey, if I just sat down and had a beer with this guy, would I like him? If we weren't talking about training, if we weren't going to talk about whether he back squats or whether he wants to do, kipping pull-ups or, you know what I mean, or toes to the bar or whatever it is, it's like you've got to separate that stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I want to ask you about this one, though, because obviously this was a while ago that the article was written, and it was listening to track coaches. And you said, please don't get me wrong, some of the people who are most influential in my professional development were track coaches. I learned volumes from guys like Don Chu, Vern Gambetta, Charlie Francis, and Brent McFarland. However, it took me a long time to realize that they coached people who ran upright almost all the time and never had to stop or change direction. The old joke in track coaching is that it really comes down to run fast and lean left. Can you talk about how maybe this would have changed or, because obviously we know your mind has changed the last couple of years on sprinting. So I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, I think maybe I would probably insert the words too much, not listening too much to track coach, because I still think you can get led astray by people who don't do what you do. And I think that could be Olympic lifting coaches or powerlifters or whatever it is. And the track coaches are that way. I had a great exchange with Stuart McMillan, which actually made my new book much better because he had some disagreements with that 3-part article that we did. And he's like, it's not that simple. And I'm like, I get it, but your job is world-class track and field. So when I'm saying you need to run fast all the time, I'm saying that to sport coaches who never time their athletes. When I'm saying that to you, you're saying there's no way we can do that. We can't time people 5 or 6 or 7 times a week. And so I think there's still a disconnect. And it's interesting because the track people are trying to make a foray into team sport again, much in the way probably that Don Chu and Vern and, Charlie Francis and those guys did years ago. But you have to realize you have to be respective of the world you're trying to influence. And I think sometimes track coaches aren't. I think they just want to come in and say, do this. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's that simple. So I guess I probably would have added 2 words if I was re-editing this.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, I'll remind everybody, we've been posting, they're all in the free article section. And they're Strength Coach Classics. And we're doing one, we've been doing one every day for the last week. And then we're going to start spreading it out to every 2-3 days. But there's a good amount of older articles that still apply today. So, Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ant. I appreciate it.
Hey, guys, right now at Perform Better, they got free shipping on orders over $49. Obviously, restrictions apply. One tip, they keep getting inventory in. So if I were you, I would call them. Don't go online. You have a better chance calling them, see what they got, talk to them. They're still answering the phones, and they have plenty of stuff coming in all the time. They've also become an important resource for the lockdown with a video series on protecting and saving your fitness business. So check it all out at performbetter.com and give them a call to find out what they have in stock. All right, now it's time for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. I'm here with Alwyn Cosgrove. Alwyn, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me.
All right, well, to be honest to everybody, we don't exactly have that much to talk about at the moment because we don't want to speculate. Some people are open. You're not open. We're not open in New York. I just talked to Coach Boyle. Their outside can be open. and they're going to open Monday, and then 2 more weeks. It's going to be personal training. So everybody's so different. But you and I have been talking a lot about this. We mentioned this a little bit last time on the show. Was we came up with these ideas, all of us in our heads in different times about, hey, when we open, we're going to have to, spray everybody down, and we're going to buy this, and we're going to fog the place and spend $10 billion on this and that. And maybe we overstepped what we maybe really have to do in terms of making people comfortable. We talked about last week doing the survey to say, hey, like, what's going to make you comfortable to come back in? I want to make sure people aren't doing things that probably aren't going to make a difference, going to change your culture. You were saying some people were doing some pods, kept doing it, and now people don't want to do that. Explain that.
Yeah, so the original idea is that every one of us who's listening to this call, I'd say 99% are not working in the big box gym with the fixed access equipment all pushed together in the rows of treadmills. So when we were told that gyms had to close, our first instinct was to shout from the rooftops. We're not the same as every gym. We're not like, we don't have to be we don't have that same sort of lineup of equipment. We're not the same thing. We can do things differently. And I've always said, hey, in California now, churches are open with up to 100 people. They're starting to open dine-in restaurants. Barbershops are open, but gyms are still not open. But as we've been saying, everything that a Walmart can do, everything that these stores can do, we could have done. So a lot of us were talking about these, all right, we self-contained training areas where we wouldn't have to share equipment, and we would just, it would be a kind of a generic workout, and we keep pushing this stuff out, and we're sending it into the city or the county or the state to try to get this sort of variance for that we're these boutique gyms, I think that's the phrase I keep seeing, are not the same as the big box gyms. And I think that was a good idea, but I don't know anybody who got given that, right? I feel like that case that we made just got ignored from everywhere, because anywhere where the gyms are open, they seem to be open. Yeah. I know Sacramento County actually got open for a couple of days for small gyms and then got closed down again by the state. So I don't know if that message got heard, but what some of the gyms that I'm aware of that are opening are doing this stuff, which is fine, but the big boxes don't have to. So you've created a solution for a problem that no longer exists, because now you're allowed to be open. Now, it's important that I want our members to feel safe when they come back. I think there's probably a good portion of members who are just ready to come back and train, right? There's a small portion who are a little nervous, and there's some who are extremely nervous and may not come back for a while. What I'm seeing with some of our coaching group members who are allowed to open is that there's people who are coming back right away, and there's people who are like, I'm not ready right now. But a lot of people are coming back and they're like, this isn't what it was before, right? Because of these restrictions. And now it's important to say, like, yeah, it's going to be a little different, I think, right? I think we're going to have to do things differently. But just be careful that you're not, as this being the business of fitness segment, make sure you're not putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage by offering now an inferior product or an experience that the members don't enjoy, right? Where you're putting them in this. We keep coming up with the phrase pods, which just sounds terrible, but it's kind of like, it's the best way to describe it is this box where we'll put all your equipment in it and you'll train there, and then you'll leave when you're done, and we'll disinfect the stuff in between. And it's, again, as we learn more about this, it seems that perhaps it doesn't transfer on surfaces as much as we originally thought. So it may be unnecessary to do as much cleaning every 45 minutes as we originally suggested. Again, all these suggestions were just to get us open so we wouldn't be going 3 months closed, right? But I don't know if that message has gotten through to the people who need to hear it. And I just want the listeners to be aware, like, You want to be open and you want to be back delivering great training and great experiences, but don't put yourself at a disadvantage compared to a bigger gym that's not going to do all the things you're doing. Only do these things if it's going to make a difference to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was just down at my friend's gym, Evolve, training in my building. And what I like about what they have there is they haven't changed the place around. Number one, like, so when you go in, they were spotless as it was, like literally like completely spotless. Now they're even, they just added a few things that'll make you feel a little more comfortable. Couple things like, hey, enter this door, exit that door. Big deal. That's not going to change anybody's experience right now. I mean, I know Coach Boyle was just talking about they have to do the pod thing because nobody's allowed to touch somebody else's equipment. So they do kind of have to do that right now for this outdoor. So they're making pods outside. Okay. But they're going to go back eventually. They're looking forward to going back to, going back to quote unquote normal. So I think, one of the things is that, like you said,
I think they're all good ideas. I just don't want to create a situation where you're doing this stuff, but down the street there's a 24-hour fitness or a bigger club that it doesn't have to do any of that stuff, that people are sharing equipment and they're just blocking off every other treadmill and they're good to go. So that's I'm kind of like on the verge of we should be doing more of this stuff, but I don't have enough equipment to take 8 people at once and do any program in the world. Like I can't give them all a Kaiser piece of equipment or a free motion or an air assault. So the program is going to be compromised, but I think it's actually nice if Massachusetts is sending out here's the structure of how it has to work, because then you're at least playing a competitive game with anybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. Well, it's a struggle. Alwyn, we feel for you guys too. You guys are still really quick. Where are you guys right now? Have you gotten any kind of indication that you might be opening up sooner than originally planned?
We have been, we were told we were in California, different phases. Phase 1 was lockdown. Phase 2 was retail could open. But then apparently within phase 2, there was like all these sub stages that no one was aware of, right? But just this week, we moved to phase 3, and barbershops, and not every county in California, but barbershops and hair salons are starting to be allowed to reopen. And originally, gyms were mentioned in the phase 3, which was this phase we're going into. So I'm hopeful that we'll get something in the next week or so. I feel like there's been a move recently, and I pay attention mainly to California, but I do for my different coaching group members. I look across the country. There seems to have been a sudden move forward. I'd love to say it was clearly we've got new science and information so we can move quickly, but I have a feeling it's just a change in the politics. But it does seem to be like a little move forward. The reality is, though, and I think it's worth sending to your city council and stuff, is we've now been closed. We're into the 11th week. We've had to let more staff go, and it's just, we can't go forever with it. Like, we can't go all that much longer. So it just speaks to, unfortunately, to our profession that I don't think we're taken seriously nationally. Like, I think barbershops are getting taken more seriously than we are. The only thing treated worse than us right now seems to be bars, right?
Yeah.
They're the only ones that are getting nothing at all. But the challenge for all of us is we all know what we can do, and it's just a reminder that, hey, if a church can open with 100 people, and we've now got dine-in restaurants starting to open and retail starting to open, we could do all of that stuff too. And it's just as if the politicians don't believe us. So it's a sign that going forward, we still got work to do with our profession to elevate our standards.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Alwyn, thanks for doing this. Remember, everybody, check out resultsfitnessuniversity.com for more information.
Hey, this is Adam.
This is Tim.
Welcome back to the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment.
Yeah.
So over the past weeks, Tim and I have mentioned the need to reappraise people's goals and help them move forward in the face of upheaval of their normal routines.
Right.
And this is something that really became apparent the other day in a meeting at work at Train Heroic. We were just talking about training and how people are feeling, and a lot of people just kind of seemed kind of blah, and like they were having problems sticking to training.
Yeah.
They like ostensibly wanted to do but weren't doing. Maybe they were feeling a little beat up and just kind of run down.
Sure.
And I said, there's something we can do about that. And so yesterday we had a team meeting just over Zoom. We're remote still. And I took people through some behavior change kind of activities, basically.
Yeah.
I had them bring a behavior or something they wanted to do or improve, a problem they wanted to solve. And we had workshop those essentially.
Yeah.
And so, these people were all starting out in kind of like either like contemplation or contemplation or preparation, that would be probably the stage of change they're in. And so we started with those types of activities. And Tim, you were on the other side of this. So why don't you tell me how it went for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was really helpful. As a coach, it's not a lot. There's not a ton of times where I'm seeking out behavior change for myself. We hold ourselves to a high standard, but man, was this thing helpful. I mean, just looking at, where I want to be, how I want to return to my ideal self. Because lately, my goal out of this whole thing was to really improve my energy and improve my mood. And I get those things from training. And I've kind of fell into the rut lately doing my own programming and, really trying to stay consistent, but that's been an issue. And we wrote down like these pro and con lists, right? Of like, why would you get back onto the, the grind and get your goals accomplished? And then why wouldn't you? And it's funny, Adam, how the pros outweigh the cons, and the cons are kind of silly. Like I have written down here, like, why wouldn't I get back into an organized training program? Like I put time down. Like what a foolish thing to put down on a sheet. Like, dude, there's 24 hours in a day. Or also like, it's going to take away time I'm going to spend with my fiance. Well, I know I'm going to be in a great mood with high energy after I train. What's she going to say? No, don't do that because you're going to be in too good of a mood. It's like, I was just making such excuses, but enlisting your help, really kind of opened my eyes, and I think it was a really helpful little seminar we went through. So don't think you're too above reaching out for help from someone.
For sure. I mean, and again, you're a coach and you could use the help, and, it benefited me too, because I did these exercises.
Yeah.
So what you kind of said was, we went through, first I had you kind of identify like what this problem or how this problem conflicts with your ideal self. What blocker is it putting up to you being the way you want to be?
Sure.
Because often when we feel like there's a problem, it's because it's in conflict with a core value, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we did a decisional balance sheet. So it really is just listing out pros and cons of changing a behavior or trying to solve a problem. And, in cases where, the trans-theoretical model and motivational interviewing, originally were applied to things like drug cessation, right? Heavier stuff where there are pros and cons, right? Some people, with alcohol, for example, or smoking is like, there's a big part of their social life that can be centered around those. And there's a con and big fear of losing that. Whereas what we're talking about is I had you bring something, you're like, I should be training. There's probably not that many cons to that. But you had to confront yourself with that realization because you had probably, and this is the common pattern of people who are in the early stages of behavior changes. They have some cons in their mind, but they're giving them more weight than they deserve, and they're giving the pros less weight than they deserve.
No question. I mean, like my cons, there's like 3 on here, and going over it, it's just like, man, I'm just like putting blockers in my own way. I'm like, I'm almost rationalizing those cons to make sure I'm not doing that thing, when the essence of my being is like, dude, that's what you do. You know what I mean? It's very interesting to me, and it really opened my eyes,
Yeah.
And then we were able to break it down a little bit further, and you were able to jump on with me personally today, and that was, taking the next step.
Yeah. And so the next steps here, I asked everybody to commit to changing their problem when they're ready, right? That's on their own timeline. But when they do commit to set a date that they want to start achieving, and then they need to form an action plan. And that's something I'll help with, as people need it. So Tim and I hopped on a call, like you said, and in, I think 15 minutes, we just wrote a program for him.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big thing. My program had gotten stale. Lean onto another coach to help you out. it helps to have someone on your side like Adam who can point you in the right direction in the weight room as well as psychologically. So
cool. That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainheroic.com, start your 14-day free trial. We actually have new pricing in there. So you can get started for as low as $9.99 a month. And we have a couple programs to help you get started today.
Hey, this is Greg Cook, and I've been sort of working my way through sort of a unique concept that I've been talking about on the Perform Better circuit and in a little bit in some of my lectures about taking corrective exercise down to awareness, breathing, and control, the ABCs. Well, a D comes after C, and that's where we get into development, and I think that's where the problem started all along. Back in the 70s and 80s, we had these great development strategies to make people bigger, faster, and stronger. But at the exact same time, we were working with a less physically aware population since I think probably the 50s and 60s. Most of our tests on military and kids show us that we were becoming less physically present and aware and capable as far back as the mid-50s in school kids compared to the rest of the world. Now, if you want to see more about that, I've done a couple of talks called Common Sense Approach to Movement and a Common Sense Approach to Changing Movement. I put those up on the FMS website, and there's simply better ways to talk about movement and how we got lost, because I'm telling you guys, exercise and exercise programming ain't going to fix what's wrong. Most people don't know what's wrong. 81% of the United States doesn't get 30 minutes of activity or exercise a day. 90%, and 81 think they're in good or excellent health. People don't know they have the problems they do, and until they're hospitalized or in a clinic somewhere, they really won't admit they're not healthy, even though the number one correlation with most musculoskeletal problems that we see is body mass index. And I know most people don't like that test, but let's be honest. If you're living a lifestyle that has you overweight or obese, you're probably living a movement lifestyle that's going to compound your problems with poor rest and regeneration and greater stress on certain body parts and zero stress on others. And that's not a balanced way to do it. Well, we're talking about development now. If we had been developing people more functionally, and I think this was maybe some of the things that guys like Vern Gambetta and Gary Gray were trying to talk about. It's like, you can't build an athlete in the weight room. You can definitely support an athlete in the weight room, and you can fix a gap or a hole or a fitness flaw in the weight room. But it's sometime they need to get on the turf or on the floor or back into the environment and pull all these things back together, these attributes together. And that's where I think we hypothesize, well, this activity uses this muscle in real life, so we're going to basically go over on this bench and hyper train this muscle and just assume it will integrate itself back in. Well, what if you had a concert symphony and you pulled 4 of those people out of that symphony and trained them completely different than the rest of the symphony? The music's not going to be as good. You may have a few standouts or a really impressive one thing over here, but the harmony is what function is. And I think the guys who are seeing athletes sort of be bigger and stronger in a few tests and less agile and less adaptable and really less proficient when it came to body awareness as we started having problems. So we started trying to say we need more functional programming. Well, by that time, it was too late. The functional appreciation wasn't growing as quick as equipment that allowed you to isolate stuff, not integrate stuff. And we thought if we just isolated enough that everybody would just spontaneously put it back together on game day. Didn't work that way. So the one thing I'm seeing in athletic development is a lack of balance. We seek that sport-specific attribute or that one test, and it's very disappointing because we've seen the military change tests. I think the Army's got a new test now. And I'm not a big fan of putting a weightlifting test in a general fitness test, especially for somebody who's going into tactical situations, because it assumes that everybody is deadlifting. And believe it or not, I think deadlifts would be a great fundamental thing to teach everybody. But if it's going to be a training tool, I wouldn't make it the test. And we can't help ourselves. Every time a new test comes out, we practice the test instead of seeking the attribute that the test simply wants to identify. You shouldn't train to the test. You should train far beyond the test. And if we've got people flunking their deadlift test in the Army right now, my whole point is they do need a minimum level of competency, the deadlift. But 3 days a week, I'm going to have you doing some type of carry. And before you know it, you'll have the minimum deadlift you need, but you will also be a completely better person all around. So I think you'll carry a pack better. I think you'll run better. I think you'll own your alignment dynamically a little bit better. I think you'll learn how to basically rest under load. And there's everything I can teach you in a light and heavy carry that will basically improve your deadlift. But improving your deadlift in 3 sets of 10 reps or getting your 50-pound improvement in deadlift, I don't think will make you a better 10-mile hiker directly. I think the carry would be a much better way to do that, but nobody asked me, so it's not that big a deal. My point is, anytime you have a fitness test, if you aim to do well in that test, you will, but you will create side effects and you may not actually cover the attribute the test was meant to demonstrate in the first place. And nobody cares what your test scores are when you lose or finish last. They just don't care. So we need to train people and not necessarily practice the test. It's disappointing to me when I see people practice the movement screen because great athletes are not challenged by the movement screen that don't have mobility and stability problems. It's not an overambitious test. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you give me 9 different symbols for numbers, I can make any number in the world as big as you want. And if you give me a certain amount of postures and patterns of the body, then I know if you can cover these with excellence, there's nothing or no shape you can't get your body into. Now, you may need to train up a skill or a physical attribute, but your mobility and stability can cover the demands of what you're doing. When you can't cover certain moves in the movement screen, we already know there are things you're going to do differently, like you can only get but so low because of X, or you can only move so quickly because of Y. So when we get into development strategy, I need you to realize one thing. A failure in one attribute cannot be outplayed in many cases by a superlative in another attribute. So we basically have a non-failure strategy. We do some wellness screens, some health screens, okay, for risk factors. And if you've got risk factors for injury, that trumps any other agenda you have, because there's a good chance if you've got enough risk factors for injury, you're not even going to be here in a month. So this needs to be a priority. And it's almost an asymmetrical effect. Your wellness, your rest, your regen, your life cycles are most important. Next, and if you've got those at least managed as best as you can, minimum effective dose, we go up into your patterns. Can you organize and move your body into different shapes and combinations with unison and harmony in an effective way above a standard? That's movement screening. There's no physical load. Boom, go up a level. You're into capacities now. Do you have any holes in the way you organize your energy system? Movement control, postural control, explosive control, impact control. Yes, we could do more tests, but these 4 show me exactly that you organize really well for carries and really poorly for power. So I realize I don't have to strength train you near as much as I have to tell you how to get more comfortable with being quick. Okay. And on that, we start to build power. And so keeping the balance and having a non-failure fixed is way better than having a personal best on a test. And so the only people I want shooting for PRs have no holes in anything else. And therefore, we're allocating our time and energy, the 2 precious resources of working out, to the weakest link in the system. And if you're training anything else, you probably ain't making a difference. So as we get through the awareness, breathing, and control, and we're back to development, the one thing we don't want to do is see that problem that we corrected come back. And it's not because we're going to continue to do the corrective for life. It's we're going to advance that corrective into a balanced development and make sure that's a cornerstone. It was a crack. We're going to replace it with a cornerstone. This is never going to be a problem again. We'll have another one somewhere else, but this isn't going to be a problem again, because we're not going to back squat with you anymore. We're going to front squat with you. Remember that warm up. Remember, if you've got that asymmetrical single leg deadlift, we're not squatting today because that means your hips are asymmetrical. Lesson learned, got it, everything else should be good. And so using development not to seek a PR or one test, but to demonstrate I'm balanced and I'm covering my marks, I think is a much better thing to associate development with than a superlative or a sport-specific maneuver. All right, corrective exercise all the way back to the development. That's what I've been working on. Thanks, guys.
All right, now it's time for the Body by BoyleOnline.com Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. Become an insider to Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning with staff meetings, in-services, and complete access to the MBSC programs. They just put up all of the winter seminar lectures, including Dan John. So check that out at bodybyboyleonline.com. All right, today I have on Scott Livingston. He's been, in the world of human performance for over 30 years. During that time, he's trained, rebuilt, and supported the performance of some of the best athletes in the world. He's worked in the biggest performance environments, including the NHL. He worked for the Islanders, my team, in the playoffs this year. That's right. Just announced a couple days ago that the NHL is coming back. He's worked at the Rangers and then one of the newer teams, the Canadiens, for 8 years before retiring in 2009. He's the founder of High Performance Incorporated, which is now Premier Performance, which is a successful multidisciplinary performance center based out of Montreal. He's the co-founder of Reconditioning HQ, which we're going to talk a lot about. Him and his wife, Jamie, have founded that. And they're doing a lot of great work with trainers. So, Scott, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Anthony. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I forgot to talk about one of the best podcasts out there, at least the second best, the Leave Your Mark podcast. And just in case you want to hear one of the most popular episodes, episode 97 with yours truly, you got to check this seriously, though. This is a great podcast. Scotty has a unique style, and he has some really great questions, and they go really deep with getting into stuff that we don't do on my show. And I think it's a really nice compliment as well to what I do here. So, but again, Scotty, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, well, it's a great pleasure. I know you've been doing this for a while, so it's nice to come on your show and contribute. And definitely different styles from what I do, but deep gratitude for having been asked to come on the show. And what you guys are doing is very leadership oriented, sir.
All right. Thank you. Scotty, I want to start off with reconditioning. I know, you and your wife co-founded Reconditioning HQ. You're doing a lot of great work with trainers and teaching trainers different concepts about really this blend of strength conditioning and physical therapy. So I know when I think of reconditioning, I think the first thing that comes into my head is almost return to play, but it's obviously a lot more than that. So talk to us about what is reconditioning.
Well, reconditioning comes from sort of at its source is the combination of therapy and performance training together. And it's blended through the sense that that's where both myself and my wife come from. We're both in Canada athletic therapists and strength conditioning coaches. But when early in my career, I recognized that those two domains of practice, whether you were an AT or a PT, or some clinical practitioner, there was always a kind of a fight between both industries, or a misunderstanding at least between the two industries. And I always felt like the two industries should be much more synonymous and have a lot of the same tools and language. So first and foremost, reconditioning it's a language of common practice. And we describe it as an operating system. So if you look at some of the different skills or techniques or methodologies that you have in therapy or in training, like, whether it be Olympic lifting and training, or, plyometrics, or training warm up, or whether you look in the therapeutic practice at ART, IMS, different kinds of, then in the blended stuff around stretching, PNF, all these different techniques. These are skills. So I kind of call them like applications on a phone. And what we've built in reconditioning is an operating system that allows you to use those skills and practices to their greatest benefit and for their greatest purpose. So at the end of the day, the other big differentiator is when we talk about rehabilitation versus reconditioning. Rehabilitation, in my viewpoint, is very reactive. I sprain my knee, I come in with my MCL sprain, you diagnose it as a second-degree MCL, and we go about going through a rehabilitation process because you're a football player. Reconditioning is more proactive. It looks at, let's look at the whole being in front of us, understand what it is that they do with their body, recognize where some of their limitations may be, or restrictions, or roadblocks to their best practice, and then go about building a program that takes those things into consideration so we get a more robust human being when we're finished. And that's fundamentally the difference between the two. So instead of, like, I feel like in the therapeutic world, we talk about everybody as being, in some ways, shape or form, sick or broken. And in the performance field, we talk about everybody working on better performance. And fundamentally, I think we shouldn't talk those two languages. We should be talking one language, and that is making people more robust. And how we do that is we use our reconditioning practice, which really blends the two worlds, brings them all together, and brings the strengths of those things to the table.
Interesting. So really, if I get this right, you're trying to take, it doesn't matter if you're doing FMS or if you're doing some other assessments or if you practice some of these other techniques, you're just trying to be able to say, here's the operating system and we can fit them in. We don't care what you're using, what your philosophy is on this, but this is how you fit it in to the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to see Gray and Lee do their first presentation of the FMS in Las Vegas back in '96, and prior to going out there, I had sort of started doing my own, I would call it, gross motor assessment associated with how somebody moved, and then started to try to look at the links to where those things were, where the holes were in the movement. And I saw Gray and Lee present, and it was really like, wow, it's the first time I've seen somebody who's actually looking at movement from a more holistic perspective. And Gray and I became friends, and Lee and I know each other very well, and I sort of followed what they were doing. I had Gray come up and speak a few times in Montreal. But I think the differentiator in what Gray has gone and what the guys in FMS have done and stuff is really, their viewpoint is that there's kind of two input screen concepts, one for the performance professional, one for the therapeutic professional. And that sort of allows you to go right or left based on that, where you're going to head and what you're going to do from an exercise prescription strategy thereafter. My viewpoint, or our viewpoint, is more that there's let's look at movement completely from a holistic standpoint. Let's have a baseline, sort of call it a point of embarkation movement assessment. But fundamentally, let's understand how we take apart movement and put it back together. So I look at it as a zoom out, zoom in, zoom out sort of strategy where, if I have a hockey player in front of me, and I'll use hockey because I know we're going to talk about our hockey summit at some future point. But if I have a hockey player come to me, I want to understand what the player does with their body, what their physical demands are on the body, where that body needs to move eloquently, so to speak, from a language perspective. And then I want to go about figuring out whether it does or it doesn't right now. And then I want to sort of understand whether the bandwidth it has right now is what it needs, or whether I have to upgrade it or not. And so fundamentally, I don't want to be hamstrung by one particular set of structural approaches. I want to be able to say, you know what, I have this issue. This is what I'm going to bring. This tool is going to create the best result here. And then I'm going to follow it up with some kind of exercise strategy and blend it into my training program and move forward. I don't want everything to be sort of siloed. So here's your rehab program, and here's your correctives exercises, and here's your training program. I want to blend everything in and be working at making this person a better mover all the time. So the strategy over time, like we have two levels of the course, the level one, which is more fundamentals. And then there's a level two where we get really heavily into context. We do a lot of video analysis. We understand the sort of thin slicing of movement and stuff. And when you look at the whole thing in its completion, the idea is really you can look at the movement, understand what the person does, build a demands profile around what they have to do, and then build the programming around those demands so that athlete or that client is better prepared to what it is that they do, and they are then more robust. They can handle more stress. They can absorb what it is that you're coming at them with from a training stimulus perspective. That's really the fundamentals of it. So it's not restrictive of anybody. It doesn't push other types of practices away. In fact, it tries to bring people together in a place of a center point of operational paradigm, so to speak.
Yeah, I would think with the FMS, and we're just going to use the FMS. Obviously, they're a sponsor of the show, and they're on here. With the FMS, I know, Gray and Lee were talking about when you saw their first presentation. I think there was, I don't know, originally 20 screens in there, and they've pared it down obviously to 7 to try to make it a little bit more manageable. So once you get through that, then you start to break down, into those other things. How do we do what you're saying without having 35 screens?
The screen concept, I think we have to sort of qualify that a little bit and understand it. And I think that's what's been in some ways butchered by call it the telephone game of people's learning information. I think Gray and Lee, who I've known for many years, I watched them do their first presentation. The idea of the FMS is that it is a screen. And as a screen, its goal is for us to just fundamentally take the time to look at movement before we load movement. And I think that was back 25 years ago, was nobody was really looking at movement before they loaded movement. And then in order to bring a bit of I think there was a quest to be able to potentially predict injury off of doing the screen. Could we actually reflect on the screen and recognize where somebody may be going down a really bad direction if they loaded or tried to train with certain measures? And fundamentally, I think that opened up sort of a Pandora's box of people's, viewpoints around its value and what it was for and everything else. But I think if we strip away all this kind of need to predict injury from it and just recognize that it's simply an opening salvo of understanding. And as Gray himself talks about, when you go into the doctor's office to take your blood pressure, that's a form of screen. You're recognizing that your blood pressure is high. You don't know why it's high. You don't know whether that's a bad thing that it's high. You just know that it's high. And so now you want to do further testing. You want to take a bigger look. And that's what the FMS is about. And it's the same thing with the SFMA. The SFMA is there for a clinical practitioner in a more clinical paradigm to get clear on where they want to go and get very precise on potentially what their treatment paradigm is going to be. The difference in what I think we do in reconditioning is we use a similar model of primary assessment that's like the SFMA, but what differentiates it is it's more of a whole model concept in the sense that we want to have a very clear picture of the zoom out side of things. What does this athlete do with their body? What are they asking it to do? What are all the complex movements that their interactions? Then we kind of zoom in and get focused on what are some of the normal types of movement patterns we would expect them to be able to express. And then we want to sort of move from there to what are some of the more specific movement patterns that they would want to do. And then we want to challenge and understand the context under which they move. And so it's a lot more complete understanding of the whole picture of what this person does with their body from A to Z, and then recognizing where the holes or limiting factors might be. So it's a wholly different concept, and I think the FMS has in my viewpoint, a tremendous place in the world, so to speak, as a point of entry. It gives you clarification. Do I need to look deeper at this person before I start loading that person? And I think in environments like gyms and the teams and things like this, where you've got to take a look at people rapidly, you have a limited focal lens, and you also have time potentially to work with the person over a period of time. Having that momentary snapshot of how they move and then working off of that as you go forward there's a value proposition to that. So that's kind of the way I look at the differences and the values of the things.
Yeah, and you mentioned SFMA, FMS. SFMA you can't use if you're a trainer. You can't even go to the course. And you guys are talking about at Reconditioning HQ, you're talking about combining this therapy with strength and conditioning. And one of the things I wanted to ask you though is, what are your thoughts in terms of like the staying in your lane idea? Because you and Jamie obviously have a certain education and background combining those two things, but there's an argument that trainers start to cross the line because we've been influenced by physical therapists here and I guess athletic therapists in Canada. Can you just touch on this idea? Because obviously you're teaching strength and conditioning professionals as well. And so there's only X amount that you can teach them, but if they're a therapist, then it's different. So talk to us about how we get this for the strength coach.
Well, I think that where we get stuck in the mud is, the idea of scope of practice is to limit people from doing things that have the potential for injury and or the failure proposition of making decisions can lead to serious consequences. And so, when it comes to things like putting your hands on people to manipulate them or manipulate tissue, to introduce needles, to introduce tools that, cause change in tissue structure, these are all things that therapists learn to implement for a purpose, given the understanding of all the circumstances and all the things that go into it. That being said, this desire to create scope of practice has defined lanes in a way that, in my personal viewpoint, is unhealthy for the practice of, movement training and health and well-being. So if I'm a strength conditioning coach, I should know how to assess movement. And in order to assess movement, I need to be able to assess joint continuity. I need to be able to put my hands on the person and move a joint and see whether it actually moves or it doesn't. I don't need to be as versatile with my hands to recognize really significant differences in that, what we call in the therapeutic community, the end feel of that joint and what I might do from a technique standpoint thereafter. But as a strength coach, and if I give you a simple example, if I see somebody squat and they shift to the left, all I know is that they shift to the left. I don't know why they shift to the left. And so it can either be that they're avoiding something, that there's a motor pathway or motor control issue, or that they have an actual limitation in one of the joints that makes up that movement continuum, ankle, foot, knee, hip. The only way I'm going to know what it is by putting my hands on them and feeling whether that joint actually moves or doesn't move in comparison to the opposite side. And my fundamental belief is that we should be teaching that to our strength conditioning coaches, in our university programs, et cetera, that they should know how to qualify and quantify movement. Where the differentiator becomes is in our diagnostic assessment strategy to actually name that tune, understand what, the whole scope of the issue is, recognize that, as a therapist, I may need to refer on because that might be a labral tear and therefore an orthopedic surgeon needs to look at it. In the same way, the strength coach should know that that doesn't move very well and this is not my domain of practice. I'm going to move it towards the therapist who has manual skills. That doesn't mean that you can't try intervening with some foam rolling and some basic stretching to see if you can change something. I mean, we've gotten into this. We've gotten so connected to scope of practice that, you literally have somebody who has some knee pain walking upstairs and now they have to wait for, an insurance appointment to see their therapist 4 or 5 weeks from now before they can start training in the gym. To me, that's nonsensical. I mean, if you ask your listenership how many people walk around with pain from time to time, everybody would put their hand up. So I think we need to be able to have people go into a gym, recognize when they have pain, recognize that pain can be changed through, good quality movement choices and exercise choices, and that there are things that the non-therapists can do to intervene and make a difference that may avoid that person ever having to go and get therapy. So that's fundamentally what my belief system is. Whether that jives with the community out there, I think people get really gnarly when a strength coach decides that they're going to go and sneak into an ART course and then starts doing ART on everybody. I mean, the fundamental is that you haven't really learned the full paradigm of understanding, and now you're applying a technique. So, you're never going to stop the charlatans who try to do stuff that they really shouldn't be doing. But I think the large majority of performance practitioners just want to know what's in the way and make the right decision about whether they should move forward or not. And I think those skills should be things that they acquire and learn.
I agree. I think it's why the TPI program, Title and Performance Institute, has always resonated with me. And it's because they talk about your first level. There's, possible therapists and doctors sitting next to golf pros, sitting next to fitness professionals. And then level 2 is they all go into their own tracks. And what I like about that is that no matter, even though, okay, I went to level 3 fitness, but each time we learned more about the golf swing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to go and teach the golf swing. It just means I know what the golf pro is talking about. I understand it. I see what's happening, and I can make better decisions. Like you said, there's always going to be a few. We've seen many golf pros who go to TPI level 1, and Greg Rose, the first thing he says is, I want you to get to know everybody in here, because what we do is we work with each other. We have to work with the doctors. We have to work with the golf pros. We just want to know what we're doing with each other, what everybody else is doing. But, you want to stay in your lane. But then a lot of golf pros come back and they're like, hey, I'm TPI certified. We're going to have a fitness class at the course, So, I mean, obviously it happens everywhere. But yeah, no, it's an interesting, we've had a lot of argument on strengthcoach.com about that. And another argument we've had is, have we gone too far with correctives? So kind of along the same line, do you think part of the industry has looked at it and said they're doing too many correctives, or they're not doing enough, or we don't need to be doing that? Is that part of what we can do? Talking about your thoughts on this idea.
Well, I think I really don't like the term correctives, because I think one of the things we seek to do, and it goes almost in line with this idea of lanes and silos of scope of practice and things, is we like to put things in boxes to understand them. Like the classic box is plyometrics, these are plyometrics. Well, at the end of the day, running is a plyometric. There are there's a continuum. And when we start to name things and create sort of nomenclature around it, it sort of creates its own, constraints and restrictions. And fundamentally, my viewpoint is every exercise must have a purpose. And is the purpose of that exercise aligning with what the intention is that you're trying to achieve, and what the outcome is that you wish to have at the end? Does it align with the context of the environment that you're working in, that the athlete has, et cetera, et cetera? And so I don't call an exercise a corrective. I look at the movement that I need that athlete to do, and I use effective exercises to change and move the dial towards where I want them to go. And some of those exercises change joint continuity. Some exercises change tissue length or availability of tissue length. Some exercises change force production. some exercises change force production in different ways, whether that's to produce more force more rapidly, some to produce more force in an eccentric pathway, etc. Every exercise has a different purpose. And so do I understand the purpose and what is the nature of what I'm doing and where do I impose it in the program, rather than that's a corrective exercise. Like I think then when you label it corrective, it becomes kind of, the label then becomes a problem for some people, and because they don't like the idea of correctives, et cetera. And I think we've lost an understanding of what these things are supposed to do. Here's a classic as an example. Like I see people doing, the classic bird dog. And a bird dog is, everybody in their mind, there's a back exercise and that's a corrective for core stability or something like that. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, the idea of a bird dog is that we want to make sure that the person can create a solid point of fixation at the trunk and move limbs dissociatively from that point of fixation, and that they can control both environments and move. And once they can do that, we want to advance that proposition so that they become more and more functional. But in the more functional environment, some of those things can't be controlled. So they don't do a good job of controlling what we like to call the cylinder or the trunk. They don't manifest the position and the postures the way they need to. And so by trying to move a limb on that, they start to lose that ability to create a quality point of fixation. Then I'm going to use that exercise to change that, and I'm going to challenge it. I'm going to create more progressions towards it. I'm going to move them towards a functional progression. But it's not a corrective. It's fundamentally, let's take the thing apart, make sure the parts move well. Let's build it into an integrated process. Let's go to load it. Let's load it with speed. Let's load it with fatigability. It's a continuum. So I say get away from the model of there's correctives and get into the model of understanding why you're implementing an exercise to achieve what end.
Yeah, I like that. I think it segues nice into, I was watching one of your videos called the Non-negotiables, and basically what you had said was sometimes we can't obtain a movement attribute from a joint because of an equipment challenge, like a ski boot or even a skate. Sometimes we need to move in a specific way in order to achieve a goal. These are movement non-negotiables. Can you expand on this?
Yeah, there are some things that based on what it is that the athlete or client needs to achieve, you can't negotiate out of the paradigm of movement. So, an example would be that a defensive back is supposed to try to keep their eye to the best of their ability on the quarterback while they're defending the wide receiver. So especially as the wide receiver is coming at them, they're trying to keep an eye on the quarterback. So they may have to pivot, an open stance pivot, but keep their head cocked and turned to watching where that ball is coming from, so that when the ball's released, they can know where they've got to go. But they've got to turn back every so often and keep their eye on where the receiver's going. And so there's a lot going on. Well, the non-negotiable is visual field. So they need to have their visual connection to certain connection points so that they know where that play is happening. So let's say they have a cervical spine issue. They don't have good right rotation, and the wide receiver goes to their left, and I have to be able to turn my head back and see what the quarterback's doing. All of a sudden, that's a non-negotiable. I can't negotiate out visual field. I have to see what's going on. Another example in football would be a field goal kicker. The field goal kicker has to kick, but he has to keep his eye on the ball. The same as the golfer. The golfer has to keep their eye on the ball. That's a non-negotiable in visual field. So I better be able to rotate around a fixed visual field. If I take an alpine skier like you were talking about, the boot limits our ability to actually uptake movement through our ankle foot, and really that changes the manifestation of movement up the chain. So now I don't have the ability to uptake movement through that joint. I'm actually more fixed in an anteriorized position. So now my knee, my hip, etc., better mechanical joints
than they would necessarily have to be if I had full movement in my ankle. And a third example would be that when I'm playing tennis, I have a racket in my hand. I can't negotiate that racket out of the game, and I can't negotiate the fact that I have to make that racket contact the ball. So everything I do has to be about making sure the racket hits the ball. So my position of my body, all the physical angles and touch points of movement are focused around the fact that the racket head has to meet the ball. That's a non-negotiable. So these are things we want to be aware of when we're looking at movement, because these are things we can't eliminate through in the movement pathway, and often have to make sure we accommodate to.
It's funny because I think a lot of people talk about that, but they don't really put it into their practice. I love that, that example that you had in that video on your YouTube page was definitely, I think it sums up a lot of what we've been talking about, or what reconditioning, your definition of reconditioning was. So good stuff. Scotty, I want to talk about sustainability. It's another video that you had, and I really liked it, and it kind of it made me think of a couple more questions. And this idea about, as athletes get a little bit older, you work with a bunch of skiers and some other, some hockey players, people that are going to really at a high level in their 30s. And obviously, as we get older, we're more mindful of how we're taking care of ourselves, right? And then certainly much more than when we were in our teens or our 20s. But, I don't want to just put it on them. Do you think that we need to be more mindful when they're in their teens and 20s, with just in terms of volume, intensity? Because you've been doing this for a long time. You've been on both ends. You think we've done too much to, kind of beating people up early, unnecessarily, so that we can maybe have a little bit more of a graceful transition into those years?
It's an interesting topic, because I think it comes back to, again, this kind of misunderstanding or misappropriation of purpose. So, there's in us being coaches or strength conditioning practitioners or whatever we come at it from, there's exercise has the purpose of challenging the mindset of the individual, of pushing them through limits that they perceive they may have, of requiring people to overcome challenge and to make the system adapt to overload. So, there's that fundamental paradigm of exercise selection. Then there's called the physiological, sort of touch point around how the physiology behaves and manifests itself based on overreaching and then recovery, and how that's manipulated. And that's that whole paradigm, call it, periodization, and which is, morphed through all kinds of different modeling over the last 30, 40 years. But fundamentally, we're manipulating the different parameters in order to tease out physiological and neurological change. And then the last part of it is we have, movement acquisition, how we move, the quality of movement, the strategies we use, the biomechanical processes that create good force proposition. So those are kind of the three categories. And what happens is we dump them all in a vat, and then we just kind of start throwing stuff at people. And fundamentally, I think we have to be more cognizant of the purposefulness of what we're doing in our workout. So are we trying to improve movement quality? Well, if we are trying to improve quality, then the rah, crazy, go after it, that part of it can't necessarily be a part of that equation in that moment. Are we trying to change physiology? Well, then there needs to be some manipulation of the overload with some idea of what we're trying to create and change, and then we need to recuperate appropriately. Are we trying to create a change in mindset and a belief that we can overcome and deal with the circumstances? Then we're going to load in a certain way. Some workouts might be a combination of things, but we're cognizant of what we're doing. And I think that's what gets missed. So when we go back to the younger athlete, I think all of those things are part of that process. We just need to be very attuned to maybe where the gaps are. So if the gap, going back to the screen and everything, if the gap is movement quality, then let's work more on movement quality with this young person and get them moving well before we start loading it. Now we start loading it, and then we throw in that let's build their mindset around it. But if their movement quality is good and we're trying to change physiology and mindset, well, then let's play with those things. So it becomes more individualistic. And so where the challenge becomes is when we're working with a team, how do we dose that out? And I think that comes back to your fundamentals. Do you have a training preparation or warm-up model that really allows you to look at the individual differences and to apply some stimulus to change some of those things? Are you, sitting down as a coaching team and recognizing where Jimmy maybe doesn't push himself and Bobby does, and Bobby has a movement issue and Jimmy doesn't? Maybe we can push Jimmy a little bit more, but Bobby, we need to fix this issue before we push him too much, so that requires a little bit more communication and more connectivity. But instead of throwing everything into a big mishmash and not understanding the relevant purpose for stuff, I think we need to be much more purposeful. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that we've really seen a lot more talk about, this idea about what we're doing. And Coach Boyle kind of talks about those bucket ideas. And so I think sometimes we just kind of throw things in there to think, hey, this is the way we've always done it. So, but obviously the conversation continues. So, Scott, I want to talk next couple minutes about the International Hockey Performance Summit. It's coming up on June 27th and 28th. It's a Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be virtually streamed. Huge names: Mike Boyle, Andy O'Brien, Matt Nickel, Mark Fitzgerald, Lauren Goldenberg, Vicky Bendis, Jamie Livingston, Matt Price, Reg Grant, Pete Friesen, so many more. And, this was supposed to be live. It's going to go to virtual. I love that you're still doing it. You got an amazing schedule. Give us an overview of this.
Well, it really came from a passion project put together actually with Reg Grant about almost 20 some years ago now. In 1998 and 1999, we ran a hockey performance conference in Montreal, and Mike Boyle came down and spoke at that conference, and so did Lauren Goldenberg and Pete Twist at the time, and Pete Friesen, and all these guys who've been around the industry for many years. And that was kind of the first kick at the can, and it was very popular, but I sort of set it aside for a number of years when I was in the league and then busy with other stuff, and did it with Perform Better with Chris Poirier, and he had been very helpful. I was interviewing Chris last year, and we started talking about the idea of maybe bringing it back, and he was very positive about supporting it. So I'm like, well, let's do it. So we put, I just reached out to all the great practitioners that I'm lucky enough to be connected to some way, somehow, through experience or just friendship or what have you over the years. It really is a veritable who's who of hockey performance guys, some of whom have been in the industry like Mike or Lauren for 35, almost 40 years. Then there's, sort of a second generation, I would say, of the Matt Nichols and the Andy O'Briens and these guys and Mark Fitzgeralds, and then sort of newer generations of, the Adam Douglases and Matt Prices. And, we've got a really nice mix of history. And I've asked two of the older guys, Lauren and Mike, to sort of really look at the history of the game and how it's changed, what they've seen, what they see pro, con, etc. We have a bunch of guys who are right in the thick of load monitoring and the technology boom of sport, like Matt Price and Adam Douglas and Reggie before he left the Rangers are all doing that stuff. They're going to talk a lot about that. Then, we've got a bunch of guys who've made their bread and butter privately, like Mark Fitzgerald and Matt Nickel, training some of the best hockey players in the world, and they're going to talk about how they train them. And so we just have, I think, a really good curriculum. And when all of this went down with COVID, I just was heartbroken that we would not be able to do that. And so I just said, let's turn it to virtual. Let's make it happen. And all the people involved said, absolutely, Scotty, we're there for you. Let's do it. And, we still have a great crew of registrants, and there's still room for people to register if they want to. They can go to our webpage, ReconditioningHQ.com, and there's a registration page there, the events page that you can click on and get linked into this event. It's 2 days, full wall-to-wall presentations, and we still kept our hot stoves. We have 3 really cool hot stoves. That was going to be something I thought was going to be a really cool part of the live event, where very intimate, not 20 people in the room talking about a particular topic, like with Andy O'Brien and Steve Norris, who's permanent physiologist in the game, talking about KPIs, or getting in the room with Adam and Reg and Matt about technology, and or some 3 vets like Mike Boyle and Matt and Nick about just the training philosophies of hockey players. So we still got those, which are intimate environments, but just intimate online. And so those I think it's going to be crazy good.
Those are just, the hot stoves are basically little round tables, mini round tables that are private, only 20 people. So you just pay a little, there's a different fee when they go on. And we're going to have links for everything, so people don't worry. He has the whole schedule up on his website on ReconditioningHQ.com. And we're going to make sure we're going to link to all that. So yeah, the hot stoves are basically just some little round tables, right?
Yeah, call them private rooms, but the hot stove comes from, I don't know if it's the same in the States, but growing up in Canada, Hockey Night in Canada was a big deal. And, there's always this kind of idea that older guys would sit around the hot stove, talk about, hockey stories. So that's the idea of the concept. Is it's a more intimate environment. It allows people to dial down on a particular topic of interest. Whereas the main plenary is like being in a conference or listening to a presentation. And we're going to record the presentations and the hot stoves, and they'll be available to anybody who registers after the summit, so they can digest them afterwards. And we are indeed going to try to do the live one next year. So those of you who maybe are more interested in the live, keep an eye out for it. It'll be back again.
Very cool. And then, so I see that you also have some research presentations, some short research presentations. Vicky Bendis, Adam Virgili, Steve Nightingale, Josh Seacombe. So you're also doing some pretty high level stuff with that. While if you didn't get the hot stove, pay for the hot stove, you're going to be able to see these research presentations, right?
Exactly. And Josh Seacombe, actually, the Aussie, is going to be presenting from way over in Australia, his research that he's done. So Vicky Bendis is a former national team member for Team Canada, and she's right in the middle of her PhD, is going to present some stuff. Steve Nightingale is over in China doing some really interesting stuff. And Adam Virgil is, from the Rangers, is in U Vermont now, I think, and he's going to do some stuff around Excel, creating Excel systems for monitoring, things like that. So it's a nice little piece for the people who aren't able to go to one of those hot stoves. So,
yeah, very cool. I just want to talk to you really quick. Let's finish up with this. It's interesting. And you and I had a little conversation earlier about it. It's in the middle of the whole quarantine, and everybody's been doing Zoom calls. Like, even people that just never done any kind of interviewing, people are just like, hey, we're going to get a couple of coaches on and do a Zoom call. And they're all doing them for free. Obviously, you and I are used to the free content as a podcast, but I think a lot of what people are doing is starting to devalue what we do as an industry, because were you worried a little bit about, man, we're getting all these Zoom calls that people are doing free stuff, and here we are, we're trying to take this thing online, and we got a great group, and we're going to record them and give people opportunities to do some unique stuff. Talk to us about this idea about all these crazy Zoom calls we got now.
I was thinking about it after you and I conversed at the front end of this, and I think it comes down to the people who are running those events need to understand or differentiate between professionals presenting their, call it IP, their, call it intellectual property, or, real structure and applied processes that they use to do what they do, and simply talking about opinion and philosophy. And I think when you have, the free call where you introduce somebody to your community, or online podcasting is connecting with people about, my opinion on this, or what I would do, or why I would do it here, like we're talking about today. I think that there's full value to having that in a free marketplace and people being introduced to different professionals. But I think when we start to talk about, call it intellectual property, call it technical delivery models, and call it real information sharing, I think that people need to understand that that's something they should pay for, and that there's a value proposition of that. And I think that when we start crafting and creating events where that's completely free, we're creating sort of an expectation in the marketplace that should be free. And so now, when all of this COVID stuff is over, people who've dedicated a lifetime to creating technological knowledge are really not going to be able to share that, and maybe take away some of the value proposition of sharing it. And I am one of those people that believes in sharing knowledge, and I've done my dose of giving my knowledge to people and sharing professionally and stuff. So I'm all for sharing. I'm a big believer in that. I just think we need to be careful we don't set a false expectation in the community at large that this is just all free stuff, because then what at the end of the day is somebody going to be able to earn a living doing? If all the programming is free on the internet for workouts, and all the IP is free, well, we've kind of eroded our industry into simply being about us having a coach individual relationship, which I think is very important, but it's not the only part of it all, right? So we got to be careful. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough. It's a tough fine line here, and obviously we've seen this more with social media and YouTube, etc. So it's not just really on the Zoom calls, but just in general, people I think need to, like you said, there's got to be a fine line. So, but great stuff today, Scotty. Thank you so much for coming on, talking about reconditioning, talking about the line between PTs and strength and conditioning and sustainability, and of course the International Hockey Performance Summit taking place virtually on Saturday, June 27th and 28th. We're gonna have all the links to that at strengthcoachpodcast.com, at ContinueFit at strengthcoach.com. We're gonna put up a post about it. So Scotty, thanks again for your time today.
Well, thank you, Anthony, for having me on. Thanks for doing what you're doing, and appreciate you having me on.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 282 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out 30 days, just $1. We're not doing that for much longer, so get on it. You'll have access to the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day. Go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Special thanks to Chris Parker and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, free shipping on orders over $49. Check it out at performbetter.com for all their products and their info on their educational offerings. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Scott Livingston for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Thanks to Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Remember, Coach Boyle and I use Train Heroic to deliver all of our online training. Check it out at trainheroic.com and start your free 14-day trial. Alwyn Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business and Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. It's also where you can sign up for their free webinar, Leading Your Fitness Business Through the Here and Now. Gray Cook and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Don't forget, I'm going to have a special episode with just the Gray episodes next time. My name's Anthony Random. My new book, Be Like the Best, consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. Go to ContinueFit.com for all my resources. That's going to do it. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.